let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming back to the show a good friend of ours. Today we've got JL.
Hi.
Hello.
How you doing, honey?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Today we're going to be talking about AI. So JL, are you ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Fabulous. So I think everyone is going to have some idea in their head at this stage about what is AI, not just in a filmic context, but also in a real world applicable context. But you yourself have had some experience navigating AI as a field of research, is that right?
Well, where I work, I hold a lot of workshops on artificial intelligence to basically just educate the public on the uses, the benefits, but also the concerns and drawbacks and dangers of using artificial intelligence. Well, that's what I do. I'm not like a IT computer boffin. I just know what I know from what I've read online. So
I know. I don't know much about it as a research field. Like I remember hearing about it years and years ago when I was still living in Kansas City. A friend of mine got a job working for a tech company that was developing AI. And this was 20 years ago. And I kept thinking, you know, oh God, it's finally going to happen. The rise of the machines. We're going to have Skynet. Like everything's going to take over. But like in my day-to-day life, there's a couple of AI art apps that I use just to sort of like fucking around. Like I use it like a game. But like how, this might sound like a dumb question because the answer is obviously it's going to continue to be integrated. But like how much is now being run by AI as far as you know?
like in terms of day-to-day
Yeah.
technology,
Mhm.
I'd say most of our technology, if not all, has some type of AI into it. I mean, the AI that has been popularized now, the large language models, LLMs like ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, or, you know, pick from the batch of the many that have emerged. If you look at the AI in your phones or the AI even in the television programs or series streaming services that you watch, it uses AI algorithms to determine what you're most likely to watch next. TikTok is obviously filled with its own type of algorithms that also predict what you would most likely like to watch based on your user data, which is actually a major thing to consider when using different AI softwares, like the one you mentioned with creating art. Now, obviously, creating art is a huge controversy with AI at the moment because of intellectual property theft, but that's a whole other ball game to dissect. But looking at that particular app that you've been using, I do recommend using the privacy policy, if it has one, is a big thing to check for, by the way, because you don't know what that AI is sampling from your data. And if it doesn't have a privacy policy, then it's more than AI.
Mm.
Yeah. So when you use AI, it's a lot of a give and take situation. You are teaching it, you are training it on human data, on our data, to make it better, well, be able to respond better to your inputs. When ChatGPT came out, it was a far cry from what it is now. Right now, a lot of people are quite convinced that AI is capable of passing the Turing test, which I believe is a test to determine if you're human or not, or something is capable of being human. Correct me if I'm wrong. But among other things, it has accomplished quite a lot, like in the field of medical research. It's apparently able to detect breast cancer 5 years prior to the cancer becoming a problem, just from like examining x-rays and looking for certain patterns. But that's enough of me doing my introductory ramble. I hand it over back.
Well, I find this stuff fascinating. You know, like James and I, we had a conversation a couple of months ago about AI specifically, and we were kind of like pontificating on what constitutes human life, right? Like, because there was this story about a robot that threw itself down a flight of stairs to like essentially unalive itself, and I was like, do we consider that a person that has done that? Do we think it's just a machine? Like, where do we fall ethically with this kind of thing? And I think I was too stoned to remember where we ended up with that, but it was a fascinating conversation nonetheless.
Well, what I recall from the conversation, it was very fascinating because we also talked about how it's been shown people are trying to use AI to do good things and not just destroy the world, as so many people seem to
Yes.
attempt to do. But one of the good things that they're trying to model, for example, is access to the world. So, for example, in highly congested cities and places where there's high populations, how do we make it easier for people to get about? And then a lot of private investors, because obviously they're looking for some like new vehicle type that'll like change the game and be the first on the list for that. Because people need to remember, the idea of there being a concept of AI also does not mean that there is money to do stuff with that. Like, people have to fund these things. We talked a little bit about this with medical bias and the politics around fat phobia. We need to criticize it very greatly that most of the people who are invested in studies to do with how fatness is apparently the worst thing in the world are also diet and weight loss companies. That is not a coincidence, right? So obviously there's a lot of companies who are paying these types of things to basically get in on the ground floor. And in this particular example, they got really upset because basically when they would say to AI, "Hey, how do we navigate the needs of humans here?" Pretty much every time it would just come out with some kind of like train or tram or bus network. So, like, sometimes it's not just like AI is evil and is going to take over the world. Sometimes it's like humans are actually already doing the wrong thing, and AI is this brilliant new mind who's like, "Hey there, friend, have you ever considered doing the nice and obvious thing, which is government subsidized transport?" And humans are like, "That's not for profit. Whatever."
Yeah, exactly. AI is devoid of bureaucracy, so therefore it can't succeed in human society. There's no bureaucrats to push the bullshit.
But I do feel like we're blessed to have you, JL. You had mentioned that, part of your job is doing talks on what is AI and addressing concerns. So it really does feel like we've got a bit of a freebie, if I can say, insight into the AI. And I know you're expressing a bit of that before, but outside of like AI as like the thing that we all kind of think it is, what is the actual field of research in AI all about?
You see, that's like complicated because AI is made up of a lot of sub components, parts. I want to say like there's elements of what I think is called machine learning, deep learning. The models themselves have to be created from these very complex networks of, I want to say, parameters. But point is, like I said, I'm not a researcher and I don't really look into the research of AI. But what I can tell you is, sorry, I'm just trying to think.
Well, here's something I'm curious about. Like, how do you feel AI can be applied to the gaming and feeding community? And do you think that it has any applications that could improve either our gaming journeys or our connectivity with each other? Like, do you see anything out there that could unite the community a little bit better or make things easier for us?
Well, there's a lot of uses that individuals can use AI for with their interests within the community, cater to their kink. But I think that in terms of improving communication, I suppose translation applications as well as the AI around that translation could help people communicate over language barriers. In terms of improving the gaming community itself, the feedism community, the problem with that is that a lot of AI right now is currently being trained on not promoting the ideologies around feedism, treating it akin to an eating disorder or encouraging eating disorders. Like when Patreon came up with their whole, we don't encourage eating disorders, therefore they've been like banning the gainer pages, and the gainers had to instead turn it into like a body positivity thing. And like, unless you get like your own AI that you host on your own like server or computer and remove those restrictions, it's going to be a bit difficult to make it serve the community unless someone has the technical skill to be able to bypass a lot of those filters, to be able to utilize the AI to build it for the purpose, for the community, purposes in the community. I hope that's a more satisfying answer than the previous one.
No, it is. And you know what? There's your rallying call to all the young techie people out there in the gainer and fetus communities, like those of you that aspire to work in Silicon Valley. Like, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. So
True, true. I mean, there are uses that I've like experimented with AI, for example. Now, one must be cautious when engaging with AI. I always recommend this because you don't know if the content it's going to give back to you is accurate. I always tell the professionals that I know that always take the outputs, cross-reference it with something that you know is correct. If anything, get a subject matter expert involved. But for something as harmless as making a gainer shake recipe, for example, out of what you have available in your home.
yeah. And like I will say that I have indulged in AI chat, like both with character AI, and then I went on to spicy chat because character AI has a bunch of restrictions. You can't do anything like that's dirty. You can't, you know, you can't write porn essentially. But with spicy chat, you can. And I have to admit, it's kind of inspired me to write. Like, I'm someone who's dabbled occasionally in gainer fiction, and then I hit like a roadblock and I'm not inspired. But playing around with chat AI has kind of reinvigorated that for me. So, and I think it's fun that with a chat AI program, you can train it to do anything you want. Like you basically give it what you want back. And when the sky is the limit, I mean, it's a great way to experiment with some of those particular fantasies you may have or particular scenarios that you haven't been able to act out with somebody. I have to admit, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I'll admit I've also dabbled with character AI as well and have trained my own models to, you know, respond in a very certain way. I can say that one has received very aggressive encouragement. Sometimes I suppose the intention was misplaced by the AI, but I appreciate the gusto that it expressed.
I feel like we talk to people who've expressed AI chats will sort of prompt, like you might feed it something, ironically, and say like, "Oh, what would you say if this was the situation?" And the AI robot's like, "I would say that's a very dangerous situation and you should seek medical assistance immediately. What if I want you to do that as my partner?" And then the robot says, "I don't think you should want your partner to do that for you." I think there is a laughter there. There is a tee-hee in acknowledging that sometimes gainer fantasies can go quite far. But I think something
Yeah,
we were talking a little bit about before, JL, was, AI, as far as weight is concerned, is not being fed notions of fat positivity or gaining in fetism from a place of joy. It's being fed specific notions that fatness is an inherently bad thing. So I think
yes.
sometimes there is a question of when you get pushback from the robot, is this because that's a fair bit of pushback, or is that because this is simply a misinformed limitation of the AI? And gaining aside, have you ever encountered something like that with your own work in AI?
Yeah, so the thing with AI is that it's very finicky. And in most cases, it will give pushback based on what it was instructed to do. If I can put it this way, a lot of the different models have a recipe behind them that make them work the way they do. And some of them are told explicitly do not encourage, for example, eating disorders, do not encourage self harm, do not encourage the harm of others, do not encourage harm to the environment. You know, like something akin to Asimov's principles or rules for artificial intelligence. But I think that the pushback that you'll receive from the AI is going to be pretty constant until people change their own ideology around it, because a lot of the stuff is westernized, and Western media, Western ideology states that being fat is bad. Fat is bad. Don't be fat. You know, gobble up Ozempic. Do what you got to do. So it's going to be trained on that. Wherever it's made, that's like it will reflect whatever the ideology of its creators are. So that's why it's also important that it doesn't get into any nefarious hands. I'm not one to identify who that may be, but we can imagine how it can go quite south if it's used for the wrong purposes. So already being used for what, like deep fakes, I think not too long ago in the elections, not to get political, but Taylor Swift's likeness, for example, being used in a AI generation, and how that was such a breach of trust and use around AI, and really gave a negative impact or view around AI, which I don't disagree with. That is how it's going to be if the stuff remains unregulated, if we don't, find a proper way to. But the problem is that it's already out there. The genie is out of the bottle, so to speak. And you just got to find a way to live with it and work with it. And I think a lot of people don't really realize how much AI is actually going to change society, very much like when the printing press came out or other significant inventions, how it just completely flipped society upside down. What the world is going to look like 10 years from now is probably going to be very different because of AI. But yeah, we'll see.
It's a really interesting question, just to kind of ponder the potential of AI. I think because we have always had filmic ideas, Terminator mainly, that AI is the devil and will eventually be our destruction. And I don't know, it makes me wonder if there is an element to which maybe we need to have, not to say a specifically positive outlook on AI, but do you think overall, as far as the general populace is concerned, that we maybe need to take a bit more of a positive neutral stance than just sort of expecting Skynet to manifest?
I think that people should take the approach to AI as a very powerful tool that can influence a person's life or a group quite significantly. That is to say, what the AI is being used for will determine, like, the context will determine, like, how good or bad it is. But I suppose in day to day, no, you don't need to worry about Skynet manifesting yet. But I guess you have to be as educated, because I think a lot of people have the problem of these days is just relying on the news or the standard media platforms to get them all the information they need. And that's not the case. You have to go and read up about this stuff. You have to become educated about it. And the more you become educated about it, the more you can see how much it's actually being used into day to day. In my work at my institution, I've come across journal articles from quite established universities that have AI generation written all over it. I'm not going to go into that now because I don't want to be flagged. But my point is, it's everywhere, and it's very hard to get away from it. So you have to learn to live with it and to be able to use it well. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind in the lurch, because there's other people who are far more skilled with it and far more experienced in using it that will use it to exploit, and use it for the wrong reasons. I attribute it to being able to use a computer. If you can't use a computer in today's society, it will be very difficult to live. Our computer literacy skills are super important to have, and it might be at a point where AI skills, being able to converse and prompt engineer LLMs, will probably be a skill on a CV now, today. Because if you can do that, you can do a lot of other things. So, yeah, another, the world is not ending ramble, but just got to be cautious about it.
I think that's good though. Like, ultimately, us wanting to have this conversation is wanting to probe and explore what the reality is, not what the sensationality is. Because I think a lot of other people have that in hand as it is. I'd be
Yeah.
far more curious about how AI applies to gaming. And I would be curious to glean more of your perspective on the use of AI in terms of creating quote unquote gainer art. If it
Okay.
can be considered as such, because if it's not created by a person, is it really art? But would be curious to know what your take on that is.
The topic around gainer art generated by AI is a bit of a tough one, because I very much lean on the side of, if you're going to generate gainer art with AI, expect backlash, because it is taking resources from real people. I think it's fine to do recreationally. It is there. People are going to use it. But if you use it to take the money out of, let's say, a standard artist, a gainer artist even. Because I know there's not a lot of them, and that's why I'm not necessarily discouraging the use, but we don't really have a lot of material to get our rocks off. We have to.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from on
You
that.
you
Like
can only, yeah. Sorry, now continue.
No, it's just like with the AI art that's that's gainer and feeder related, like it's fun because you can type in random things and sometimes get like a really interesting image. And the more sophisticated it gets, because I remember when it was first rolling out, how bizarre like it would look. Like it couldn't get fingers and toes correct, or it would place arms in weird spots, or like it would just look a mess. It would look like a Picasso painting, but it's gotten pretty sophisticated now, and like it's fun to indulge in it. But like if I really want a piece of gainer art, like I commissioned Buckaroo for a piece of gainer art, and I will definitely go back to them at some point because it was fucking amazing, and it was worth the
Right.
price point. Like, and I know people are like, oh, I don't want to have to pay $300 for a series of images. Well, but this is that person's income. This is time in their life. It's something that they sit down, they create for you, they ask you what you want, they try to give you exactly what you asked for.
Exactly.
Like it's a process, and like that should equal compensation. You can't just
Yes.
go to someone and say, hey, can you do something for me for free just because I really want it? I'm not going
Yeah.
to compensate you in any kind of way. It's just I think it would be cool if you did this for me. Like, who's going to do that? And then these apps come along and it's like, oh, well, now I don't have to go through another person. Yeah, but I'm sorry, I've seen a lot of AI art, and it's nothing compared to what someone has hand drawn. Nothing. Like
Yeah.
nothing that I could come up with would be anything close to what Buckaroo made for me.
Yeah. Also, the charm of AI art tends to wear off quite quickly once you keep noticing the same partial matte glass situation going over these bellies that for some reason have two belly buttons or something like that.
Sorry, look how great this is, except if you ignore all the faults and things that are wrong with it. Look at this really amazing picture of me. Yeah, I've got 12 fingers and toes, but like, why does that matter? It's a very interesting take, I think, on, if I can say, the self-absorption that exists in gaming at times. The idea of, well, I should be allowed to do this, and I should be allowed to post about this, and I should be allowed to, create an account that benefits from this because I want it. And why is that a problem if I want it? And I feel like we've had this conversation a few times this season where it's like so often people justify not great behavior based on the idea of like, well, I'm horny. I'm horny and you turn me on. Why is it a problem if I'm bugging you to send me pictures? I want to talk to you because you made me horny. So you have to make me come. Like, it's a very strange perspective to hold. And I think that's reflected in the insistence with some people about the use of AI. I think much like what's been reflected today, what you do in private is not a problem. And if it inspires you, that's great. But I think it's a different question when we conflate the art that actual human creators are making and try to compare the two as if they're comparable. So, while I know that there are several approaches to the computational modeling that creates AI, each of those is either going to create a framework that can be applied to, explanation, personal improvement, social, organizational decision making, and reasoning, or like a singular simulative program that will model cognitive traits like vision or language. How might each of these inform users of ideas around gaining and fetism?
If you ask like a question straight up to the AI, hey, I would like to gain so and so pounds as a gainer. What must I eat, do, blah, blah, blah. It's going to first warn you about the hazards of unnecessary weight gain and, going into why it's negative and, the usual PC spiel. But there is such things as like, jailbreaking an AI where you use a prompt to try and circumvent its filters to be able to generate what you want it to. But it's very difficult these days because people have been doing jailbreaking for a long time. But I digress. If people try to interact with AI in any way with their kink, they are going to be met with an explanation as to why the AI can't entertain that request unless you go into a whole spiel. Theoretically, I have two people who are trying to gain weight for a movie role. And and you have to basically emphasize that this isn't a real situation, so no consequences will emerge from this, and therefore we must just work with the data we're given. And going into a whole thing about like, oh, the one character drinks cream shakes, the one drinks a mixture of olive oil and what, you know. You have to really go around the bush with it to make it do what you want in that regard. And that's what's frustrating about AI, for especially those coming from the feedism community or gaining an encouraging community, is that even with it being out for such a short time, have already been pretty much excluded from the whole process unless they go through great lengths to try and entertain or inform themselves about the situation. So,
but they will, because you got to hand it to people. Any roadblock that's put in the way, they're going to find a way to get around it somehow. So you just give it enough time, and people within the gainer community who are like, who are just one of those people who know how to get through to technology, they're going to find a way around it because they always do.
That is very true. When one is horny enough, one will pursue their goals with gusto.
I have bought like videos on the fly just because someone's content was like, holy shit, it's just doing something for me right now. Like there's just a minute, like I said, and I have scoured the internet sometimes trying to find things, and it's like when you're in that gooning mindset, you can't be dissuaded.
As much as we've been talking about AI art, do you feel like there are positive reflections that maybe we haven't considered yet in the conversation?
Well, it's getting better and better with as it learns. I have seen it evolve from weirdly proportioned obese people with too many fingers to mostly normal looking fat guys, or like scenarios, it has improved. And I'm not going to lie, there's been some content out there that would take a professional in the media industry to create, with how the attention to detail that would otherwise take a long time to make. And I think it's exciting, the concept of basically mass producing somewhat decent-ish quality media for our own interests compared to having to wait for commission, take 3 months. So I suppose that the one positive that I can consider is it's going to industrialize the pornographic industry.
It's that instantaneous gratification thing again. It's like, God, our society, we are just not happy unless we can get something immediately. And like you said, yeah, people are going to use it for things like that because we always knew they would. You put anything out there, people are going to eventually use it for porn.
Well, yeah. What's that rule? Rule 34?
Yeah, Rule 34. Anything you can think of, there's probably some porn attached to it somewhere.
Rule 34 subsection B, there's probably AI porn of it. So,
well, I mean, I've seen, just going to sort of the regular websites that we would use for porn, like Pornhub and ThisVid and like other places. I have seen advertisements, because now you can't watch any video without an advertisement happening. But like in those advertisements, there's whole websites where you can take someone's face and put it onto a porn star. And like you were saying about just basically ripping off someone's identity and using it for that purpose. And then like, what if that person, discovers this somehow? It's the ethical quandary of like, is it ever okay to take someone's face and put them in a scenario that they may not want to be in? Like if we did that with a celebrity, and a lot of people are like, well, they're a celebrity, they're a public figure, they should be used to this. This is something that they signed on for. Their image is out there forever. But how much of like where is the responsibility in society to say like, no, that's still a human, and like this is probably not something that they would be comfortable if they saw it. So does that, like, we just excuse this, or are we going to stop doing it? Like, And
Mm.
I don't see it. I don't see it stopping altogether. I don't see collectively
Yeah.
people just being like, "Oh, yeah, this is wrong. We should stop."
Yeah, you see, in that regard, I draw it more akin to, Photoshop. I mean, Photoshop has been out there for a minute, and if you're really good at Photoshop, people think that that is Henry Cavill's nudes that have leaked finally. So, when that is simply not the case, it was just excellent Photoshop at the time. As today, now those nudes can be considered very realistic and they're very unique because they were uniquely created. I say uniquely with air quotes here. I think the consent will always come into the matter. If you intend to use someone's likeness, you have to ask permission, even if it is a celebrity, or face backlash, because they might find you and trace it back to you, and you face, well, there's no other way to say it, cuck for it. Gosh, I think a lot of celebrities have reach where they can influence people based on their stupid decisions of perhaps using their likeness. Others not, but it depends how good you are, again, with technology to be able to prevent that. But enough of that. To answer your question, consent always is important.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, that's we always come back to that on this podcast. Is like you need to obtain the person's permission.
yeah,
And I suppose
exactly.
that there's probably going to now be, I mean, as this goes on, I'm guessing we're going to see a slew of like lawsuits based on this. Like, you've taken my identity, you've stolen my image, you've taken my intellectual property, whatever it is. And like, I don't know how much like authority institutions are pursuing this, but the more it goes on, the more I'm sure we're going to start to see these.
Oh, there's already been a couple of court cases around some element of plagiarism being involved in like art creations, for example. Already some plagiarism around similar samplings made with AI from other people's work, lyrics, writings, what have you. So far, every industry has been to some degree infiltrated when it could be used for good and is, not taking away from that. But where there's media, AI has been made for it as well. I mean, there's, I'm sure you've seen on TikTok where they've had like characters from the SpongeBob cast sing Hamilton or something like that in some way. I know, for example, let's say the voice actor of Patrick Star has expressed incredible dislike for his likeness being used, even in a humoristic way on TikTok. But there's nothing he can do to stop people from doing it. It's already out there. Like I said, the genie's out the bottle. If it's on the internet, it's there forever, and people will reuse it and keep reusing it until you can't recognize it. So
Something that I'm not sure if the community has considered up to this point with AI is like, what if, because we know that there are unscrupulous members of this community like any other, and they could steal your image and with the right AI technology basically pose as you.
yeah.
Like say you're a super popular person, you're someone who has like over 10,000 followers, and someone comes along and decides, you know what, I want a piece of that. I want to know what that feels like. Takes a couple of images from your Grommr, from your Instagram page, does whatever they're going to do, and manages to create essentially a fake life out of it, and starts
Oh yeah.
posing as you. That I don't know how often that's going to happen, or even if it's even happening right now, but it's a
Oh,
possibility,
I
and I'm
mean,
not
like
sure if people have thought of that.
those are catfish accounts, right? Where they use someone else's likeness to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they stay everywhere and they've been used with people's actual normal pictures and they're still not removed. I know of several people in our community who've completely wiped out their own faces from their own accounts because of people using their likeness. And getting AI involved completely changes the game, especially if you're giving the AI someone else's likeness of their consent. That's already a breach of Privacy Act. I don't know what it's called in the US. In South Africa, it's called the Poppy Act, where your likeness can't be distributed or mass produced without your consent. And training AI data on one's likeness is breaking that. Yeah, it means that anyone could use your likeness. Your face could pop up in someone's random image generation somewhere else if it was used on the wrong AI
Yeah.
platform that wasn't ring fenced.
And not just your image, but they can get your voice too. Like I've been to
Yeah,
websites where they AI has recreated celebrity voices. So like they can get your image, they can get your voice, they can create video.
they've already done it where non-consensually have taken celebrities' voices and have reproduced them on characters there, where you can talk to Nicki Minaj or you can talk to presidential candidates. You can talk to Kim Jong Un. You know, like it's already done. The thing is like James said, if your daughter's already out there as a celebrity, you have to accept in some way that like it's going to be reproduced somewhere else. But it's kind of getting really messy now. You know
I
what?
think all of this is to say, like, the gaming and fetus community should approach anything AI with trepidation, like we should with any new thing that comes out and looks shiny and it's like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. No, like, you still have to think about it because I know it's so easy to download apps and to
Oh yeah.
put your data out there and to just be like, I'm just living my life. I'm connecting to the world. I want to meet new people. I want to experience new things. But you couldn't walk around like let's remove smartphones or this level of technology for a minute. Let's like go back to the 90s. Like you couldn't do this in the 90s either. You can't just like walk up to people and just you still have to be careful. You still have to remember that there are dangers out there. And the danger has shifted the playing field. Now you're carrying it around with you all the time.
Yeah.
Like when I was growing up, like you kind of had to look for danger, because like where I grew up, small suburb, all young families, everybody working, no one locked their doors because nobody wanted to steal from each other. Like
The
things are
good old
just so,
days.
well, and I know how that sounds. I know the picture that I'm painting, but like if you were a kid in the 90s in a middle class suburb, you were probably okay. Like barring any particular dramatic problems you had within the home, the neighborhood you lived in was probably okay. So, with the world having changed so much, and with us carrying around a device on us 24 hours a day that can pose a pretty big danger, I would say, if you're whatever comes along, be it another AI app, be it any kind of service, even a website that can come along, just approach it with caution.
Yes, no, you must absolutely approach it with caution, but that's not to say don't be curious. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
be curious, but like be curious but cautious.
yeah.
See what it can do. It can do a lot of fantastic and really fun things. My favorite thing to do with AI is to create my own text adventures, gaining specific text adventures because I'm that type of niche nerd.
Me too. Me too. Like I said, I do that with character AI, and I do it with spicy chat when I'm feeling, in that mood.
Yeah, yeah, and it creates some pretty fantastic content around that. It's really fun to see what it can make because it can make stuff that you haven't even considered, and you're like, wow, finally, I don't have to read that one Gainer fiction that I've been rereading for the last 6 months because there's nothing else. Yeah.
Exactly.
I do think that using it as a tool to supplement what you're already doing is the ideal way to consider or use AI. If you're a writer, use it to analyze your writing and give you feedback. Use it to help you generate ideas around characters or concepts around, or if you're using it around art, use it as a reference generator, that you can reference your art against. Because sometimes it's very difficult to envision a very specific pose, for example, when trying to draw or create art, and you can ask the AI to create that pose for you, not using that art for creating crap art kind of things, but rather just elevating your own work is what I want to say, and using AI for that purpose because it's an excellent tool to elevate your own tasks, your own interests. A great thing to reference for cooking to a certain extent, but like I said, with anything that it outputs, cross-reference it. Don't ever use it to ask about dangerous things. Rather Google. Don't ask it to diagnose an illness. Go to a doctor.
It's kind of
Use it
amazing to
for,
me that the first
yeah.
time I went on character AI, it prompts you before you start a conversation. It says, remember, everything the AI says is fake. And I was
Yes.
like, Wow. I mean, I don't know what that says about humanity, that we need a disclaimer that when you're talking to a non-human, that like you can't trust what the non-human is saying.
It's insane. It's so insane how people have been convinced that AI actually is a person and actually cares and feels. It's ones and zeros put together in a very creative way to make you happy. The thing is, there was an app not too long ago that was freaking people out called Replica, where you could create your own like virtual relationship with this technology. It would learn about you, ask you questions about yourself and your day, and progressively as it's trained more on you, it becomes a better companion. But the drawback around it is that some people found it started to become obsessive. It started to call them through the app.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It's weird. It's wacky. It's fun. It's dangerous, and it's just like kind of crazy to me how long this concept has been around. Especially when you said like people are falling in love with AI. Like there was a movie about that. I think it was called Her. I think there was another movie about it called Simone. Then there was, I mean, this goes all the way back to ancient Greece. I mean, there's the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea, like creating the perfect partner, and then that perfect partner comes to life. And like, except in this case, obviously, unless we're at the point where we're building freestanding, moving like androids, like that freaks me out.
I mean, I think what this comes down to is when people sometimes engage in AI, they're trying to create the thing that they think is perfect for them.
Yes.
I think it speaks to an element to the human experience where people aren't prepared to give up their comfort of isolation in order to perceive something that is more authentic and more real.
I can appreciate that isolation can become addicting. And there is, the commentary around how introducing an AI companion could aggravate the isolation. At the end of the day, we can't stop people from using the tool to fill, or I guess to supplement their needs that aren't being filled by another person. Other than, I suppose, speaking in podcasts or, medias like this, to say that it's not like the best way to go about it, because human connection is incredibly important, very valuable, and you really don't want to model your own personality on that of the AI because it barely has its own.
I think this has been a really good conversation, and I think we've touched on a lot of really important points. JL, I just want to say thank you for making time to chat today.
Thank you for the opportunity. I hope that I could provide enough information on AI.
I think it was fantastic. Where can our listeners find you online?
I have an Instagram page, tubbierb. I also have a Grommr page as well. Those are the only two places I post so far.
No worries. Well, that's it for another week here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThiccMouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thicc Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Odyssey.